AWS Cloud Formation and Azure ARM templates, is it a good idea or advantage to convert them into Terraform? The answer is both yes and no. It depends on what you want to do. So if you want to continue working on Azure and then there is no multi-cloud scenarios which your organization is working on, then continue with whatever you're using. But if your organization wants to get into multi-cloud environment, then it is a better idea to change them. Okay. Yeah. Right. Right, sir. So yesterday we have set up the authentication for AWS. Okay. I'll quickly reiterate what we have discussed yesterday. Yeah. March 23. Okay. Right. So this needs to be corrected, right? Yeah. Everything is going in here, which is not right. Okay. This I'll correct anyway today. Yeah. So yesterday we have discussed about an architecture of a simple entire application where we have a database component and then there is some business logic server which runs out of Tomcat. And then I said that since it is if it is a Java application, we'll be using Tomcat. If it is a .NET application, we'll be using IIS. And if it is a Python application, you might be using Flask or whatever it is. And in the front end, you have a web server. Now, this is the architecture of the application which we want to deploy. For that, the infrastructure is something which you want to realize. So to realize in AWS, the architecture becomes something like this. You will have a network which is called as VPC, and in this VPC you will have subnets, and in those subnets you will be basically creating two subnets for database and two subnets for your business logic layer. Okay, and in this business logic layer you will be creating two EC2 machines and installing Tomcat in that, and you would be replacing your web server because there is nothing much your web server does in this architecture rather than forwarding the request to the business logic, that is application server. So for that reason we have replaced this with load balancer. And now if I speak of Azure, the same thing happens over here. So in Azure you will have two subnets created in a network, in a virtual network, where you will have one subnet for your database and one subnet for your application server, and then you would be creating multiple application servers in that subnet, and then to redirect requests you will be creating a Azure load balancer. So this is what we wanted to achieve, and in the process of achieving this we will learn Terraform. That is what we have discussed in yesterday's session. And then okay, so what we have said is if you remember the class before yesterday, I was able to use Terraform without configuring any authentication. It was working. Okay, so we have started by trying to look at how does this work out. So I have created a Linux machine, installed Terraform there, and then in that I have installed AWS CLI. And then I said that whenever you configure provider, Terraform automatically picks up credentials from your CLI. Okay, so we have created an IAM user in AWS, configured the credentials, and used the same credentials to work with Terraform. That is what we have done. Okay, so today we will be dealing with, yesterday we have dealt with AWS provider. Today we will be dealing with Azure provider to achieve the same thing. Okay, right. When you are downloading the recordings, you are getting file type error. Sir, if you want to download the recordings and play them, first try to install Quality Thought Video Player, sir. Otherwise, it will not work. Yeah, try to get in touch with Satish or whoever admin team is, and they will help you in installing the software. Am I clear on that, Prem? Yeah, right, sir. Okay, so now Azure provider. Okay, so we all have looked into the day before yesterday's Terraform template where I have written a main.tf file, and in that main.tf file I have written provider, right? So Now let me go over here and I need a Linux machine or a Windows machine where Terraform is installed. Yesterday I have one machine where Terraform is already installed, so I'm not going to create one more machine. Okay. బాధగా ఉందా సార్? అంత బాధగా చూస్తున్నారండి నాకేసి, నేను రాలేదా? మిమ్మల్ని మీతో నేను మాట్లాడేది. నేను వచ్చారా? నేనా? మీ కాదు, మీ వెనకాల. వచ్చారా? మరి అంత బాధగా ఎందుకు చూస్తున్నారండి? నేనేమైనా పాపం చేశానంటారా? రైట్. నచ్చకపోయినా బాగా నవ్వుతో చూస్తూ ఉండండి. రైట్. ఓకే. Yeah, whenever the screen comes, man, I always mess up. Hopefully, yes. Right. So yesterday we have created one Linux machine, and in that Linux machine I have installed Terraform, and also I have installed AWS CLI. Today what I'll be doing is I'll be installing Azure CLI. Yeah, right. So you can do the same work on your Linux machine, on your Windows laptop also, right? Okay. So this is the machine where I have installed Terraform yesterday. Yeah. Okay. So let me log in into this machine. SSH-I. In the downloads folder, I have something called as for terraform.pem, and the username is ubuntu at the rate. Right. So if you remember, in this machine yesterday we have installed Terraform. Terraform is available over here. Okay. Now Terraform provider Azure. Okay, sir. So are you saying Azure provider? Yeah. In Azure provider, to authenticate with Azure, there are multiple ways. Okay. So you can use authenticating with Azure using Azure CLI, managed identity, client secret, and all that stuff. Out of all of this ways, let us stick to the same way where how we are using AWS. Okay. I'll be installing Azure CLI, configuring authentication, and let Terraform use the same authentication. Okay. So refer here for the provider documentation. Okay. Right, sir. Now in this machine, I have to install Azure CLI. So Azure CLI installation. If you are working on GCP, you will be installing GCP CLI, right? And Terraform automatically reads it from there. And I'm using Ubuntu machine. So I'll select this. And then here it tries to tell that if you want to install it in Ubuntu, there are two options. One is you can use this, or you can go with step-by-step installation. If there is one step, why will I go with multiple? So I'll go over here and then paste it. So while it is doing its job, okay, to install Azure CLI. Refer. Okay. Now in AWS, if you remember, after we basically installed AWS CLI, we have created an IAM user, and then we have said AWS configure, and then we have configured credentials. In Azure also you can do the same thing, but there is a simpler way. We will be resorting to the simpler way. Okay. Let us see what that simpler way. Simpler way is, okay, after installing Azure CLI, to authenticate Azure CLI, execute the simple command called as AZ login. Okay. AZ login. Then it says that open this link and this is your key. Paste this. What is your code? This is my code. Click on next. Then it will ask what are your Azure credentials. Okay, so this is my Azure credential. Are you trying to continue? Yeah, that is exactly what I'm trying to do. That's it, done. There is no need for you to create an IAM user, access key, secret key, everything will be done by Azure. So if you are seeing this JSON, everything is looking fine. And then let me try to execute a simple command, which is az group list. This command should not throw error. That's it. Is it working? Yes. Okay. And then az group list. So if this command is not throwing, then you are good with what you call authentication is done. Now let us try to configure Azure Provider. So make dir hello az tf, and then let me get into hello az tf. I have to create a file which is main.tf, and in main.tf I am going to use a provider, and I need to figure out what is the name of the provider. Okay, so here he is trying to tell that name of your provider is Azure RM. So let me try to write Azure RM. Okay, all right. Let me not write anything. We will get some errors and we will fix that. And in that process, let us understand how providers work. Okay. Now, what is the first command? Terraform init. Is working? Now, let me try to add something simple, which will basically, this is copy paste, I know that, but let us just try to do that. Main.tf. Okay, right. Now, let me try to tell Terraform apply. Apply will create the infrastructure. So let me try to tell apply. So it says that insufficient features block. In Azure, if you want to create uh, or create resources, you have to add that features block. Init will work, but when you do this, it will not work. So for that reason, go over here and then try to add an empty features block, and then let me execute Terraform apply. I will not create anything. I'll say no when it asks, do you want to create the infrastructure? So on my Windows laptop, when I created the infrastructure on the other day, basically what has happened is Azure CLI is logged in on my Windows laptop, and AWS CLI is also logged in on my laptop. So that's the reason, without configuring any authentication, when I did Terraform apply, it was trying to do something. Okay, if you let me do yes. I'll click on yes. So basically that should create some resource group called as example. Okay, it says it has created it. So let me go into my Azure account, get into resource group. So what was that resource group? Example something, right? Are you saying example resources? So is Terraform able to speak with my Azure account? Yes. So I don't want it. So I'll go over here and then I'll try to tell Terraform desktop. So did you understood this authentication part? So for some time, till we learn other Terraform concepts, we will be relying on CLI authentication for Terraform to work. Are we clear on this? If it is AWS you are creating, I'll have AWS CLI logged in. If it is Azure, I'll be having Azure CLI logged in the machine where Terraform has to execute. Okay, right. Okay, let me try to tell. Yes, S means it should delete whatever it has created because I have executed a destroy command. తెగ టైం పడుతుందంటే ఇది ఈ వాటికి అయిపోవాలి. రైట్, ఫైన్. You do refresh. Let it take its own time. Now let us get little bit more academic about the work which we are trying to do. Okay, but did we understood this concept of provider now? Yeah, and in provider authentication, yes. So even if you join an organization where they ask you to work on Google Cloud, go to the machine, install Google Cloud CLI, log in into that, Terraform will automatically pick up from your CLI. Okay, right. Providers. Okay, so whenever you're working any on anything in Terraform, okay, so basically you would have two major things for some time. Okay, providers and resources. Okay, so in Terraform, to create any resource, we need to configure provider. We know that. So right now we know about two providers. So every provider has a specific structure. So the structure is this. You would write provider, and here you would have whatever your name of the provider is. Whatever your name of the provider is. If it is AWS, it could be AWS, Azure, whatever it is. Okay, and then in addition to that, you would have certain values which you can pass. Okay, so the values which you can pass could be, I'm trying to write argument 1 equals to value 1. So depending on the provider, you might have multiple arguments which you need to pass. Argument n and value n. This is the structure. This is the structure of any provider. Okay, so in the case of AWS, we have just written provider AWS and didn't fill anything. Okay, but if we were to fill, what are the possible values? And if we were to fill Azure, what are the possible values where I can find that information? Okay, right. So now provider AWS Terraform. Okay, right. So are you seeing a section called as argument reference? In this documentation, are you seeing a section called as argument reference? Click on that. So are you seeing here you have, there is something which is called as access key, which you can pass. This is an optional field. If you don't give this value, it will try to search for something called as environmental variable called as AWS underscore access underscore key underscore ID. If it doesn't find it, it will try to take it from a default profile. So basically in AWS provider, I can give access key, allowed account IDs, assume role. There are many fields which we can basically pass. Whole list of fields. Okay. But it is not necessary for you to have all of them. Okay. If you want to do something special, you can basically do that. Otherwise, it is not required. But in Terraform, whenever you are configuring any provider, you will have multiple arguments. Multiple arguments. But not all the arguments are mandatory. Not all the arguments are mandatory. If you remember, in the case of Azure, there was something called as features that was required. If I didn't write features and then if I tried to do apply, it said that, okay, I'll not work because you have to tell me what the features are. Because in Azure provider, they said that this is mandatory. In AWS provider, they said that nothing is mandatory. Okay. So whenever you try to work on anything, don't forget this section, which is argument reference. Okay. So AWS provider argument reference. Am I clear on this, sir? Yeah. All right. सर फर्स्ट डिलीट वन सर शोएब एक के बाद एक करते हैं ना सीधा लास्ट में चले जाए इतनी भी जल्दी क्या है सर आपको राइट फाइन हाँ बारिश का मौसम है और आप ऐसे सवाल पूछ रहे जो आखिरी में पूछ राइट फाइन सर नाउ let me basically look at Azure's argument reference. Are you seeing Azure features? Are you seeing this is required? Since it was required and I have not passed it, if you remember, and then I asked Azure Terraform, go and create the resources. He said that I cannot do it until unless you provide me a features block. So in the arguments list, there will be certain arguments which will be mandatory, certain arguments which will be optional. You have to ensure that you are at least passing mandatory arguments. Optional features will basically add more functionality. Will add more functionality to it. Okay. So now this is Azure provider argument reference. Are we clear on this, sir? This is basically the provider. Provider speaks about where to create the resource, and for that you can configure different values. For example, in Azure, there is a concept called as subscription. I can have one account and many subscriptions. If I want to create this in a special subscription, I can pass that ID over here. In AWS, you can pass something called as region, where you are trying to tell the provider where do you want to create resources. Okay, so you have many fields over here, but always ensure that you are at least passing required fields. Okay, so are we clear on this, sir? Yeah, right. Now, resource. Okay, the syntax or structure of resource in Terraform template is you would have something which we write as resource, and then you would have type of the resource. Okay, and then you would have name. This is not name of the resource which gets created. For example, here I might give a name called as A, but actually I might create a resource in AWS with the name B. This is not the name of AWS resource. This is the name of the resource which you are trying to refer within the scripts. Okay, so here this name has nothing to do with what gets created. This name has something to do with what you're writing. What you're writing. Okay, and here also you will have argument 1 to argument. Yeah. Am I clear on this, sir? Okay, so generally the type of resource will be in the form of provider underscore resource type. So for example, if you try to look at resources in Azure, you would see AWS underscore EC2 because your provider name is AWS, and then resource type might be EC2. In the case of Azure, it would be Azure RM underscore something. So generally they start with the name of your provider. That is how Azure comes, that is how Terraform comes to know which provider your resource belongs to. Okay. So for example, let me show you one simple mistake. Okay. So vi main.tf. So are you seeing azure.rm? This is the provider's name. And are you seeing resource type? Azure RM underscore some type. Now let us assume by mistake, okay, you have typed some extra characters over here. Azure double RM. It was just sheer typo mistake because sometimes we type extra characters. Now let me try to tell Terraform validate. Let us see what happens. Okay, it says that you are using some Terraform which is called as Azure double RM. Okay, and for that provider is not available. Are you clear on this, sir? But if you look at this error message without knowing how that works, you would think, okay, I have configured provider correctly. Everything seems to be right. But why am I getting this error? This error is because of a simple mistake which you have typed by typing the wrong provider name in your resource type. Are we clear on this? Yes. Good, sir. So what is the fix for this? This is the fix for this. Now you do, oh, sorry. Now you do Terraform validate, everything starts working. Are you clear on this? Yeah, right. Now, right. So now let me do one thing. Manual steps of VPC creation. Remember, we want to realize entire network. In that entire network, we had to basically create, or we need to have a network. So let us just try to see how do I create a network first. Okay. So steps. Okay. The basic motive is let's create a simple VPC. Okay. So let me go to AWS. Go to a service which is called as VPC. Because to automate, if you remember yesterday, we have discussed something called as WOW, ways of working. First know how it is done manually, then try to automate the stuff in Terraform. Without knowing how to do it manually, don't even try doing. Okay, because you will never know if the mistake is in your Terraform template or if it is in functionality. Okay, so okay, so I have logged in into AWS. I'm going into a service which is called as VPC. Okay, your VPCs. Let me do one thing, sir. I have one additional VPC which I want to delete. Okay. So by default, you will be seeing one VPC. Don't ever mess with that. Okay. Never ever mess with that. So now select your VPC and click on create VPC. Okay, sir. create VPC. So here you are giving name tag. Remember, it is a tag in AWS names. So let me call it as manual, so that we have created it manually. And then over here it is asking from IP address in CIDR range. So here let me try to write 192.168.0.0/60. Okay, this represents, okay, everyone knows that IP address is a 32-bit number, right? Yeah. So 192.168.0.0/16. So start from here. 8-bit means this. 16-bit means this. Do you agree with me on this? This part is fixed. What this CIDR is trying to tell us, till that part everything is going to be fixed. Rest of the things are variable, which means that your IP address will be anywhere in between 192.168.x.x, where x can be any value between 0 to 255. 0 to 255. This is what that means. So now let me go over here and then let me give 192.168.0.0/60. Okay, all right. Okay, sir. Scroll down. Now the next of the sections is it is asking, do you want IPv6 CADR block? I don't want any of this stuff. I'll try to tell that. Just create VPC. Okay. What is 16? Just now I said that, right? IP address is a 32-bit number. Out of the 32-bit number, 16 bits are fixed. That is what it is trying to tell. 16 bits will stand for this. Whatever is left is variable. So that's where when you create this network, your IP addresses can be anywhere between 192.168 0.0 to 0.192.168.255.255. Attend grooming session, sir. I have spoken about what an IP address is and what is fixed part and variable part. Okay, right, sir. Now let me click on create VPC. So when you created the VPC in AWS, whenever you create anything, you will get a unique ID. What is that you would get? You would get a unique ID. Right. Let us do baby steps. Don't let us not try to do a whole architecture at one shot. Let us try to do things. Let us improve on our Terraform skills, and then we will try to continue further. So are you saying there is something called as manual which we created? Yes. Now shall we try to achieve the same from Terraform? Yes. Okay. Okay. So for working on this, what I'll try to do is, let me try to create C drive. I think, yeah, DevOps, Terraform, March 23. And then let me try to create a folder which is called as enter. And in enter, let me try to create a new folder which is called as, this is enter with respect to AWS. If you remember, we have to do this in AWS as well as Azure. Okay. Now the first thing which I'll do is I'll try to tell that this is going to be my main.tf file. And in main.tf, what I'm trying to tell is my provider is going to be AWS. And I'm not interested in any other details, because in AWS, if you remember, it automatically takes my CLI credentials and all the features, all the rest of the arguments are optional. Okay, good. Right. Now, what is that we have created, sir? What is that we have created just now? VPC. So whatever we create in cloud is called as a resource. Do you agree with me on this? Yes. So There are two ways of searching what we have done. So what is that we have created? VPC. So Terraform, AWS, VPC. Just click on this. Are you seeing this? Is this a easier Google search? Terraform, provider name, and whatever resource which you want to create. This is one way of accessing it. So if I was trying to create something in Azure, Terraform, Azure, VNet, Terraform, GCP, Bigtable, something like that. You can basically use the same pattern for anything. Or the other way of doing that is Terraform, AWS, provider. If you remember, we have opened this page already for configuring provider. And in this, are you seeing there are many things over here? Yeah. What is that we are trying to create, sir? VPC. Okay. So scroll down. Where is it? Yeah. AWS underscore VPC. You can search from here also. Okay. Whatever you find comfortable. There are two ways of basically searching. One is you can Google it directly or search in the documentation. I would basically recommend, okay, you starting with Google and then eventually ending up over here. Okay, right. So I'll give these two screenshots. Okay, this will directly take you there. Okay, so for today, let us stick with this Google approach. Okay, but eventually I'll go to the documentation approach. So what is that I've searched for? Terraform AWS VPC, which has given me resources. We are interested in resources. Even if you see any other names like modules or whatever it is, I have not spoken about them in the class, so you need not worry about it. That is my headache, not yours. Okay, just focus on whatever is covered in the class so far. So let's search for resource. Right, sir. Now I click on this. So it has opened this. Okay, which led to, okay. Now in this, okay, if you try to see, he's trying to tell that if you want to write this resource block, resource AWS underscore VPC and whatever name which you want to call it. So let me try to write the same thing over here. Resource AWS underscore VPC and then name, let me call it as N. Any problem so far? I want to call my VPC as entire VPC. Yeah, fine. Now in here, if you remember, I said that always look at argument reference because it tells what are the values which you need to pass. Okay, so argument reference. Okay, now look at arguments. So ఒక్కసారి గతాన్ని నెమరు వేసుకుందాం. Once let us recollect our memories back. So how did I create my VPC? While creating VPC, I've passed, given some name, I've given CIDR block, right? And then the tenancy was default, and then I clicked on create VPC. So these are the inputs which I have passed. Yes or no? Inputs in Terraform will become arguments. Okay, right. Now if you go over here, are you seeing a argument which is called a CIDR block? Yes, good. 1 minute, sir. Let me go over here and then let me try to tell Terraform init. Okay, so I have a little bit older version of Terraform, but that's okay. Okay, for whatever work which you are doing, it will not be major difference. Okay, so what is the first argument, sir? CIDR underscore block. So are you getting help? This help you are getting because you have installed HashiCorp extension. If you don't install this extension, you will not be getting help. So 192.168.0.0/60. Any problem so far? Yeah. Now, instance tenancy, it is optional and it said that default value is default. If you remember in the UI also there was default. So why should I fill this value? And then I have not pushed this IPv6 CADR block. I am not entering, right? You get into anything, but there is one thing which I have entered, which is tags. So let me try to write tags. But the problem is I don't know how to write tags. Okay. So let us see if there is any example which I'll try to tell about it. Tags name equals to main. So I'll try to write tags name equals to entire. Any difficulty, sir? That's it. You have done. This is what you do in Terraform. Okay. Now let us try. Let me go over here. And the first thing which I'll try to do is Terraform validate. Okay. It says your configuration is looking good. Now Terraform apply. But if you remember, I don't want Terraform to ask me questions. Okay. If that is the case, I'll give high auto approve. Let us not do that. Terraform apply. Let us see what Terraform does. Terraform will try to connect to your AWS account using CLI credentials of yours. And then it will try to see whatever you have asked for is already present in AWS, or are you asking for something new? Since it is asking for something new, are you seeing something in green color over here? So green means it is going to create. Green means it is going to create. So what it is trying to tell is you have asked me to create a VPC. Okay. In this you have asked me to put this as a value. So there are some other things which will be also be created, but right now I don't know them. I'll be knowing those values after I create. That is what known after apply means. Known after apply ante ప్రస్తుతానికి దాని వాల్యూ తెలియదు, క్రియేట్ చేశాక తెలుస్తుంది, right? Known after apply means that अभी उसको उसका वैल्यू पता नहीं है क्योंकि वो क्रिएट करने के बाद पता चलेगा. Okay. So known after apply basically represents those values will be known after you create the resource. Now it tries to tell that you have asked me for creating a VPC, and that is exactly what I am trying to do. And then anything in green color basically represents it is going to add. Some generally in red color over here means it represents deletion. It represents deletion. Let me try to enter a value over here, which is yes. Okay. It says that, okay, you are having an unauthorized. Yeah, I know what is the issue. Yesterday I've changed the in AWS class. I've created a IAM user who doesn't have any permissions to create this. Okay, let me try to sort this one out. Cat dot AWS సిగ్గు లేకుండా ఈ మొత్తాన్ని తీసుకెళ్ళి I have to configure AWS credentials, sir. That's it. That is what was missing. Now let me do the same thing. Terraform apply. Is it saying trying to tell that it is done? And if you see, it is trying to tell that I have created a VPC with an ID this. Yes, sir. Okay. Create the template as now validate and apply. Right, sir. Let me go into AWS, refresh this. Are you seeing entire, sir? Yeah. And 1617C. That is what it ends with, because remembering everything is not possible. This is a VPC ID which ends with 167C. Is it the same thing which it is trying to tell? Yeah. So are they basically same resources? Good. Now let me have screenshot. So did you understood the basic resource creation now? Yeah. So first you configure provider, then you understand manual steps, you fill in your resource syntax, and then your resources will get created. Right, sir? Okay. Now let me basically give this chain set. What was it? 1 minute, sir. Okay, sir. As shown in this chain set. Okay. Now, if you have understood my creation process, so tomorrow I'll try to do the same thing in Azure. But in Azure, what is it I'll try to do? I'll try to figure out what are the manual steps. Then I'll try to figure out what is the resource, what are the values which I need to pass, and then I'll do the same thing. Okay. So this provider and resource combination, did you understood now? So for a resource to work, you should know what are the inputs. Inputs become arguments. Okay. For the resource to be created, we need to have some connection. That connection is established by your provider. That connection is established by your provider. Now, no matter how complicated your infrastructure is, once you are able to write over here, you can execute it and create it multiple times. And then also you can go down the line, or probably in 1 week from now, we can also create reusable stuff. So that if you have to do something similar, there is no need for you to do the whole rework again. So we can reuse. We can reuse. Now, other advantages, once you have done this work, now if you execute apply, if there are no changes, Terraform will not touch your resource. Let us try to see what Terraform tries to tell now. It says that there are no changes. You have asked for something, you have exactly the same thing on the cloud, so I am not going to create it for you. This means idempotence. This means idempotence. For whatever you have created in AWS so far, there are no charges. VPC is free of cost. So there is no need for you to worry about the cost of this when you are practicing this. Are we clear on this, sir? Yes? Okay. Right. How Terraform destroy knows which resources to be created. So because Terraform has created the resources, somewhere it should be storing that, right? So if Terraform destroys resources which are not created by them, not created by Terraform, that is a puzzle. If Terraform tries to create the resources which are created by it, it might be storing it somewhere. As of now, we don't know, or we don't have the knowledge of where it stores. Okay, because we are still trying to construct how to write Terraform. Am I clear on that, sir? We'll go step by step. Yeah, right. Sometimes I don't directly give the answers because it might confuse you. Okay, right, sir. Good, right. So tomorrow Terraform class is in the same time. Tomorrow and day after tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday, we'll have classes in the morning time itself. Morning time itself. Okay. And for the people who have joined from Terraform, okay. So today there is JYP demo in at 11 o'clock. Okay. In Nilgiri block in room 209, or in your Telegram, you will be getting that link. Okay. Right. So for the people, this week we have only morning classes, no evening. So this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, just like today, you will have the same time. The reason for that is we have a AWS and Azure workshop for the people who know compute. So who have joined this week, don't have, there is no need for you to join. Okay, but for the people who are AWS students and Azure students, you will be getting in your Slack notification about the workshop which we will have. Okay, right. Right. I have deleted the default VPC by mistake repeatedly. I didn't know the consequences. Could you please advise me on how to restore it? It is easier, sir. All you need to do is, are you seeing actions? Okay. For me, it is grayed out right now because there is already a default VPC. If you don't have a default VPC, you would have this enabled. So go to the region where you have deleted the default VPC and click on actions and create default VPC. నన్ను అడిగిన క్వశ్చన్ గూగుల్ అడిగితే ఈ పాటికి ఆన్సర్ దొరికేసేది మీ. ఓకే, రైట్ సార్. We are having Ugadi holiday. Yeah, Ugadi is on which day, sir? 22nd, right? Yeah. So 22nd ఏనా? రైట్. ఆ రోజు సెలవు తీసుకుందామండి. ఓకే, ఆ రోజు సెలవు తీసి సోమవారం మళ్ళీ సెలవు ఉందిగా, చూద్దాం ఏదో ఒకటి చేద్దాం. రైట్, గివ్ మీ 2 days of time. Let me figure out. Ugadi there will be holiday. There is no doubt. Okay, whether Monday will be the holiday or not, let me decide. Yeah. What was the existing default VPC in AWS UI? Sir, AWS creates that default VPC in every region. If you delete, you have to recreate. Okay, that is basically what you're supposed to. Otherwise, you'll have some consequences. I don't want to speak about that at this moment. Okay, when we speak about networking in AWS, then you ask me what is the consequence. I'll try to tell about it. Okay. Right. When can we expect you on webcam? Yeah. Um, when can you expect me on web? The expectation ఏముంది, ఇప్పుడే ఆన్ చేసేయచ్చు. But this webcam is not that great. The problem is it will be disturbing your recording, sir. Yeah, because when I switch on my webcam, even that recording will, that my face will be part of your recording. Okay, ఇప్పుడు నేను హావభావాలు పలికెత్తానికి పెద్ద నటుడిని ఏం కాదు. నా ముఖం అక్కడ పెట్టుకొని మీరు సాధించేది ఏమీ లేదు. రైట్. సో ఇఫ్ యూ రియలీ వాంట్ టు డూ ఇట్, we will try on one day. Yeah, Ugadi is on Wednesday. Yeah, yeah, right. Ugadi is a new year of Telugu states. Yes. On that day you'll have a holiday. I'll be announcing that on Sunday. Right. So fine, sir. 11 o'clock JYP demo, and tomorrow, for the people who are eligible, you will be getting a Slack notification about the workshop. And tomorrow and day after tomorrow, class timings are not changed. They are the same timings. Okay. Right. We'll speak about it. Yeah. Right. Can you please sharing grooming links, sir? Please speak with Satish, sir, because I don't have them. Okay, so grooming links, recording videos, I don't have them, sir. Kindly speak with the admin team. If there is any trouble, you bring it to my notice. I'll speak with them. Yeah, right. You are saying JYP demo? Yes, sir. Today at 11 o'clock, you will be having JYP demo where you will be getting that link on Telegram. Yeah, right. Okay, sir. Thank you.